There is a question that sounds simple, almost practical on the surface, and yet for many women it quietly becomes frustrating over time, because no matter how often it is asked, the answers never seem to fully land in real life. What is the best time of day to exercise? Morning, when everything is still quiet and untouched. Midday, when the body is said to be strongest. Or evening, when the day finally slows down. Most advice you find will give you a very clear answer, often backed by studies, performance metrics, or optimization strategies. You will hear that morning workouts boost metabolism, that afternoon training improves strength, or that evening movement helps with stress relief. And while none of this is wrong, it is also not the full picture, especially not if you are a woman over 40, and even less if you are navigating life with ADHD or a highly sensitive nervous system. Because in that case, exercise is no longer just a physical decision. It becomes a neurological one. It affects how your attention works, how stable your energy feels across the day, how deeply you sleep, and how much internal noise you are carrying at any given moment. And when you start looking at it through that lens, the question shifts. It is no longer about what is theoretically optimal. It becomes about what is actually sustainable inside your real life and your real nervous system. And this is exactly where longevity begins to change its meaning. Longevity is not just about adding years. It is about maintaining a system that can function well inside those years. A system that does not constantly swing between overstimulation and exhaustion, between pushing and collapsing, between trying to keep up and needing to withdraw. After 40, this becomes more visible. Hormonal shifts begin to influence energy regulation more strongly. Recovery takes longer than it used to. Sleep becomes lighter or more fragile. Stress has a deeper and more immediate impact on the body. And if you have ADHD, these shifts do not happen in isolation. They amplify patterns that were already there. Your brain may already process more input than average. You may already notice more detail, more emotional nuance, more environmental signals. You may already experience phases of high drive followed by phases of depletion. And what used to be manageable in your 30s can suddenly feel inconsistent, unpredictable, or simply too much. This is why generic fitness advice often stops working at this stage, not because you are doing something wrong, but because the framework itself is incomplete. It assumes a system that responds linearly, and your system does not. So instead of asking, "What is the best time to exercise?" it becomes far more useful to ask a different question, one that is quieter but much more precise. At what time does movement support my nervous system, instead of adding more load to it? That is the question that leads to real change. If we start with the morning, we are entering a window that is often misunderstood. Morning workouts are frequently recommended as a discipline tool, something you get done before the day begins, almost as a form of control. But for a sensitive or neurodivergent system, the value of morning movement is not discipline, it is orientation. When you wake up, your body is already in a naturally activated state. Cortisol rises in the early hours, not as a stress signal, but as a wake-up mechanism. It prepares your system for engagement. And if this activation is left unstructured, it can easily turn into mental scattering, especially with ADHD. Thoughts begin to move quickly, attention jumps, the day starts without a clear anchor. Gentle movement in the morning changes that dynamic in a very subtle but powerful way. It gives the activation somewhere to go. It organizes it instead of suppressing it. And this is why even 10 or 15 minutes of very simple movement can have a disproportionate effect. A slow walk with natural light, a few minutes of stretching, basic mobility without intensity or pressure. What matters is not what you do, but what it signals to your system, that the day has a starting point, that there is direction, that there is a container. Over time, this becomes a stabilizing rhythm, something your nervous system begins to expect and rely on. However, there is an important boundary here that is often overlooked. If you move too quickly into high intensity in the morning, you can push an already activated system into overstimulation. Especially after 40, when recovery is slower and stress tolerance is more variable, this can create a subtle form of internal pressure that accumulates across the week. So the goal is not to maximize the morning, it is to guide it. As the day progresses into midday or early afternoon, the body enters a different state. From a physiological perspective, this is often the time of highest performance. Muscle function is improved, coordination is more refined, and strength output tends to be higher. If your goal is purely physical, building strength, improving performance, this window can be highly effective. But again, context matters. For many women, this is also the most cognitively demanding part of the day. Work requires focus, decisions accumulate, social interaction increases, and mental load builds. If you now add an intense workout on top of that, the effect can vary significantly. For some, it feels energizing and clarifying. For others, it becomes an additional drain that makes the second half of the day harder to manage. This is where self-observation becomes more valuable than any general rule. Because longevity is not built on optimal single moments. It is built on patterns that can be repeated without resistance. If a midday workout consistently leaves you more exhausted than supported, then it is not the right placement for your system, regardless of what the data says. The evening introduces yet another dynamic, and this is where many women intuitively gravitate toward movement, even without consciously planning it. After a full day of input, stimulation, and internal processing, there is often a need to transition, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. Gentle movement in the evening can serve exactly that function. It acts as a bridge between activity and rest. It allows accumulated tension to release, thoughts to slow down, and the system to gradually shift into a more regulated state. This does not require intensity. In fact, intensity at this time can be counterproductive. What works best here is softness, a slow walk without stimulation, light stretching, simple breathing-based movement. These forms of movement signal to the body that it is safe to downregulate, and when this is done consistently, it can significantly improve sleep quality, which is one of the most critical factors in long-term health and longevity. Because no matter how optimized your workouts are, if your sleep is compromised, your system cannot recover. When you step back and look at these three phases, morning, midday, and evening, a pattern begins to emerge that is far more useful than any single recommendation. It is not about choosing one perfect time. It is about creating a rhythm that works with your nervous system across the entire day. For many women with ADHD after 40, a structure like this becomes both effective and sustainable. In the morning, you create gentle activation, not to exhaust yourself, but to organize your system and reduce internal noise before the day unfolds. 2 to 3 times per week, you include more structured or strength-based movement, placed at a time where your energy naturally supports it rather than fights it. And in the evening, you allow movement to become a tool for regulation, a way to release the day instead of pushing through it. This rhythm reduces decision fatigue. It removes the constant question of what you should be doing. And instead, it creates a predictable framework that your body can settle into. And this is where the conversation returns to longevity in a much more grounded way, because longevity is not built through intensity or perfection. It is built through consistency that does not feel like constant effort, through systems that reduce friction instead of adding more pressure. For neurodivergent women, this is especially important. Your system is already managing a high level of internal complexity. Adding rigid, demanding routines on top of that often leads to cycles of motivation and collapse. What works better is something quieter but far more powerful. A simple daily check-in, not analytical, not judgmental. Just a question: what does my nervous system need today? More activation or more calming? More structure or more space? And then you choose your movement from that place. Not perfectly, but consistently enough that it becomes familiar. Because over time, it is not the individual workout that shapes your health. It is the relationship you build with movement itself. And after 40, that relationship becomes one of the most important factors in how your body ages, whether it feels supported or constantly pushed, whether it feels stable or repeatedly overwhelmed. So if there is one thing to take from this, it is this: the best time to exercise is not the time that looks optimal on paper. It is the time that allows your nervous system to stay regulated, your energy to remain stable, and your life to feel sustainable. And when you begin to approach movement in this way, something shifts. It becomes less forced, less dependent on motivation, and more integrated into your daily rhythm. That is where real change happens. And that is where longevity quietly begins. If this way of thinking resonates with you and you want to build a life that works with your brain instead of constantly pushing against it, then this channel is for you. Here we explore how to create energy, structure, and calm for complex nervous systems after 40 in a way that is grounded, sustainable, and actually livable. You can subscribe and build this step by step. And for now, just begin to notice. At what time does movement support you? And at what time does it create more strain? That awareness alone is often the first shift.